Hey guys, welcome back to the Darth Kilhoun channel. I'm your host, Darth Kilhoun. Today I will be starting a new series, a review of the second book of the Horus Heresy, which belongs to the Warhammer 40k universe, called False Gods. It is the second book in the Horus Heresy series. So far I've only read part 1, and I will be reviewing part 1 in this video today. So I would like to start off with that I absolutely love the book so far. I'm only within the first 100 pages, but so far I love all the characters. I love the experiences that all of them are giving and all their points of view and how it can really shape the Warhammer 40k universe, because this is like at the tail end of the Great Crusade and right before the Horus Heresy, where they're showing the Sons of Horus Space Marine Legion, which used to be called the Luna Wolves before Horus ordered its name change. It's showing them and how they're discontent for much of the Imperium and what it's turning into, how it's turning into more of a bureaucratic mess instead of a military junta, which they preferred, even though neither form of government is really superior if you think of it of grand scope, and most of this is told from the point of view of the actual warriors in the Great Crusades, the Legione Astartes. And yeah, it's so far just really good book. I highly recommend it. The first chapter, it actually opens up. It doesn't even start with the Astartes itself. It starts with the Legione Mortis, which is a Titan legion of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and it's from one of their Moderatis, a Moderati Urana, and she is initially in her office, like writing out some sort of letter or something, or some sort of record that she's trying to write, but she can't quite get it right. She's always having to revise and just having writer's block overall, until eventually she is called to the Titan itself. So she leaves her office and kind of like observes the entire Legion, the entire Titan Legion, and how she is like one of the drivers of the largest Imperator class Titan, specifically with another Moderati Titus Caesar, which he is a religious nut. Well, he's not really a religious nut. He's more one of those spiritual guys that is going to turn into a religious nut out of the. He worships the Legiones Divinitatus, which that's like their holy book that the Primarch Lorgar wrote before the Emperor chastised him and his legion, and it's apparently still circulating around even 20 years after the humbling of Lorgar, and it got into the hands of this Moderati, but then it goes on after they start up their Titan and they get ready for a battle. They don't discuss the battle, they just kind of like tell you that, yeah, just running basic procedures and just another day in the field. To them, war is just another passing moment. Every battle, just another day. And it really goes to show the theme of, in the grim dark of the far future, there's only war, which is a major theme of Warhammer 40k, that it is just a grim, dark galaxy, and that war is just universal. There's no peace is a distant, fond dream that will never be realized. And this goes on to, in chapter 2, you are introduced to Captain Gabrielle Logan. He is the captain of one of the companies in the Sons of Horus, and also part of the Mournable, which I will get into later. But he is repainting pieces of his armor. He went chink from chink of his power armor, repainting it and rebranding it from the white and red of the Luna Wolves color that previously adorned his armor to the kind of dark green muck type color armor after the renaming of the Luna Wolves to the Sons of Horus. And he is doing it methodically, piece by piece, and he doesn't just give it to a lower ranking man within the Legion or a servant to repaint his armor. He prefers to do it on his own, really showing that he's a hand-on officer and kind of relatable because some people like to do things with their hands, and he's that type. And then it goes on to he is talking while he paints his armor to a remembrancer. The remembrancers are like these artists, poets, writers, and historians, journalists, etc., that are recording the history of the Great Crusade. And you don't really see them in the first book of the Horus Heresy. You more start seeing them now, where the Legioni Astartes, the Astartes legions, most of the Astartes don't trust the Rembrandtsers and keep them to certain portions of the ships and don't even like talk to them very often because they just view them as like the media, like we don't need to talk with these people and they are just a detriment. We should give them a. In fact, there was the Space Wolves. They mentioned them. They're another legion in the Great Crusade, another Astartes legion. Their Primarch, Lehman Russ, says, why don't you just give them a gun that would make them more useful? So they just view them in very discontent, but Logan, he doesn't. He actively speaks to remembrancers. He has one in his room as he is repainting his armor, and the remembrancer is giving like his own point of view on the entire war, the scenario, etc., etc. And then Abaddon walks in. He is the captain of the first company of the Sons of Horus Space Marine Legion, and he doesn't have the same outlook as Gabrielle Logan. He has more of a, on the Rembrandtsers, he has more of a pessimistic view. He's very short-sighted. He doesn't really like the idea of peace and civilians, and he more prefers warriors. He wants to live a warrior's life, which, of course, for some people that is natural, and it really defines Abaddon's character. He's one of the most hated characters in all of 40k, but at this point, he is just a simple officer in the Astartes legions before he becomes the War Master of Chaos 10 millennia later. But then the Legioni Astartes, just a simple rundown. There are 18 legions. Originally there were 20, but 2 of them were destroyed. 18 legions, and they vary in size. Most of them are around 100 to 200-ish thousand Astartes, along with hundreds of thousands to millions of human soldiers that go out and are conquering the galaxy in the Great Crusade, for all those who aren't familiar with 40k. And this is especially the very beginning of 40k, the Great Crusade period, which was kind of like the establishment period of the Imperium. And it is really interesting to see them in these early days because they aren't divided into chapters. They are instead formed into legions. Chapters are essentially just 1,000 Astartes. Instead, you see these giant conglomerate armies of multiple hundreds of thousands of Astartes just in one legion alone, in one singular unit. Instead of just having them all divided across the galaxy, you have them in these massive clusters, and makes them a very effective fighting force. They can feel just these amazing numbers and bring war to entire worlds. Just one legion alone is enough to conquer multiple worlds at once. And in the modern day 40k universe, like only 1,000 Astartes, they're more for specialist style roles in the Imperium's military. Like they do small action warfare, they do special operations, they do surgical strikes, but they can't do the same blunt assaults as they did back in the Great Crusade. And the Sons of Horus is a very interesting legion at that, because it is the legion of the head Primarch, with the Primarchs being the sons of the Emperor, the princes. There are 18 of them, one for each legion. There was originally 20 of them, but 2 of them were killed or gone missing. It is left kind of ambiguous. But the Sons of Horus are led by Horus Lupercal. He is the Primarch of the Sons of Horus and the War Master of the Imperium. The War Master meaning that he is like the superior amongst equals when it comes to his brothers, because they're all essentially like 20 twins. They're all twins, or whatever, 20 of them, because they were all grown in like cloning tubes, fat tubes, or whatever they call it in the universe. And he's been at war for a long time, like over 200 years, and he is starting to get worn down by it. He no longer views warfare in the same gleaming light. He just sees it as another day, another step towards the end. And this looming idea of peace that is coming over the entire idea of the Imperium, that there will eventually be an end to the warfare. And then all these magnificent Astartes warriors, they will be warriors without a war. And especially Abaddon, he doesn't express his concern, he expresses his anger at even the thought of it. He wants eternal war because that's what he was bred for, that is what he's meant for. He is a warrior. And while then, like Loken, he is more of the Astartes that is coming to acceptance of that, and he's questioning what will be their purpose in a peaceful galaxy once all the war is over and humanity is unified under the Emperor. And Abaddon just can't even fathom it, and he brushes off Loken's ideas. And the Rembrandts also kind of like illustrate these thoughts as they talk with the Astartes. They're like, well, what are you going to do after the war? And they just have none of it. They don't even want to talk about it. They keep their distance because they know that the Rembrandts are partially there to kind of instruct the Astartes on how to be peaceful instead of just these bloodthirsty, savage warriors. And Horus is kind of seeing this. He sees the peace coming, but he doesn't want to admit it completely, but he wants to show that to his brothers and to the Astartes legions that it is possible, even though he doesn't even want it himself. So he creates an organization that was existent in the last book called the Mournival, which is kind of like a council of his closest advisors. They aren't necessarily the most highest ranking in the Astartes legions, and some of them aren't even from the Sons of Horus. But this Mournival group, they are mostly officers within the Sons of Horus Astartes legions of varying rank, and they come together as equals, as brothers, because they are brothers, technically, well, kind of technically, and they just discuss like ideas and concepts about war and advise Horus on course of actions and plot and ideas and possible like actions to take in the future, strategies, etc. And it is very effective. Like Gabrielle Logan, he is a member. Abaddon, he's a member. But then there's also a member that is not part of the Sons of Horus Legion, and that is the first chaplain of the Word Bearers Legion, a famous Astartes named Erebus. Erebus is kind of an interesting figure. He is a warrior monk at heart. He is a war leader, an officer, and yet a spiritual guide and a philosopher. But he knows how to use his philosophy to manipulate the emotions and stimuli of those around him. He can direct conversations. He can spout philosophy and abstract thoughts where to people who can't even fathom or don't think of those things on an average basis, or are just simply incapable of thinking those, like Abaddon. And later, Gabrielle Logan confronts Erebus on the observation deck of the Vengeful Spirit, which is the flagship of Horus Lupercal. He confronts him while they are alone, and they are in the warp, and he's trying to talk to him about the dangers of it, and Erebus kind of like views it as like, well, if the Emperor in his divine wisdom doesn't view it as dangerous, we are humbled to use it. It is a magnificent field of energy that we can manipulate and flow through us, and we can use to travel from one end to the galaxy in no time at all. And he just takes this esoteric view, and it just confuses Logan. And that's just how he speaks. He speaks with a twisted tongue and double hyperbole all the time, and double meaning. And later on in the Horus Heresy series, you see where Erebus takes all this manipulation too. In fact, even later in this book, you'll see what he does. But he overall is kind of seen as the reason why the Horus Heresy even takes place, why Horus betrays the Emperor, is because he manipulated him to do it. And he is part of the Mournable, even though he's not part of the Legion. And Logan also observes that the other brothers of the Mournable, they kind of view him as like as a fellow brother, even though only the members of the Sons of Horus are actual brothers. And the word bearers are separate legion, they are separate genetic stock from Lorgar, and he's kind of like discussing, like, why do you treat this guy equally, which is very valid. Why do you treat him as a brother? He is not one of us. And then, but then as they greet him, Erebus comes into the Mournable meeting, the one Mournable meeting you see, and he immediately starts off with, I have disturbing information that received by the word bearers that this planet that was conquered by the Luna Wolves previously, now the Sons of Horus Legion, had turned traitor. That the planetary governor on Davin, the world Davin, had turned against Horus and the Imperium, and stated that he specifically is defying Horus. And he says that to Horus's face. But then Horus is enraged. He's like, I appointed that governor 60 years ago, and he's turning his back on me. He has betrayed me personally, and he takes it very personal. And then Erebus, he suggests that, well, this isn't, how about we just send a small detachment of Astartes, and I will personally lead it for you. He offers to lead it, to manipulate Horus to go to the planet itself. And this just enrages Horus even more, to think that he would just throw off this betrayal so easily and give it to a subordinate, somebody lower than him. And this, Gabrielle Logan, he sees this. He sees what Erebus is doing, and he discusses it with another member of the Mournable, and he's just like saying that he is manipulating Horus. We can all see it, but then Abaddon, he comes to the defense of Erebus, like he is a brother in the Mournable. He is here to advise, and he gave us pertinent information about the betrayal of the commander Tiba, which was the governor of Davin. He has betrayed us. He has betrayed the Imperium. We need to go. And Horus has every right to be angry, and he just defends everything. And can't just see what Erebus is doing. What he has done, he's turned even fellow members of the Legion against each other, which has kind of damaged the cohesion that they're in their unit. Now they are starting to question every move made by Horus, made by Abaddon, made by Loken. They all are looking at each other. And that is bad for a military organization. Military organization need to have trust amongst your common man, and trust that they will be by your side no matter what, thick and thin. But this, what Erebus is doing, is just driving a wedge, and you see this in the first part. very blatant, very in there, getting deep into the skin of everyone in the Legion. But then Horus, he decides that it is time to embrace the Rembrandts on their way to Davin because he wants his great deeds to be recorded, as he nearly died previously in the war against the Interrex, and his legion had been devastated. Well, they hadn't been nearly destroyed, it was just a very long campaign, and he wants a legacy to be left behind in case anything was to happen to him, because he has a very high ego. So he orders for a Rembrandtser of high status to come to him and to document his life. And this comes into the form of a woman named Petrona Vivar. I believe that's how you pronounce it. But she is a member of a noble family from Terra, or Earth, as we call it. And she comes up all dressed up nice, or at least as nice as possible for a warship, and going before the War Master. And he is stripped of his armor. He's wearing a tunic in his room, in his office, just kind of relaxing as he's sharpening his sword, readying for battle. And then he puts it aside and greets this new Rembrandtser. And he tests her, and he's like, "Are you truly up to snuff?" And she kind of shoots back at him, like, "Yes, if I am," and blah, blah. She just shoots back, and the spite that she shows him, he likes, and he's like, "You'll do well." And then he asks her, "Well, what do you want out of this?" And he's like, and then the Rembrandtser, she says that she wants to see the war. She wants to document the War Master personally in his life and write out his biography and his great deeds. And he's like, "Well, we are approaching a war zone. Why don't you join us?" And she's kind of hesitant. She's never been to a war zone. She's never seen war, even in a galaxy filled with it. Terra was just kind of left off to the side. It's the very center of the Imperium. It is rich and peaceful, while the rest of the galaxy burns. So she's very unfamiliar with the concept and hesitantly accepts. But then on their way into Davin, they go into orbit. They figure out that the traitor has set a base on the moon, orbiting it, a moon able to sustain life, etc., etc. And Abaddon and Logan get into an argument in the loading bay while their troops are getting ready for drop. And they start talking about the Crusade and what will happen after. And then this is where the whole discussion of, well, what will the Astartes be in a galaxy without war? In a galaxy of peace, we will be peacekeepers, nothing more. And of course, Abaddon's like, there will always be a fight, there will always be war. And Logan's like, well, we are doing a pretty efficient job in destroying every threat that comes our way. So at this pace, we are going to be completely worthless come the next century or two. That we are not going to be useful. We are just going to be sitting around, warriors without a war. And Abaddon just refuses to believe that. He refuses everything. He's very stubborn and thick-headed, constantly looking for something. He justifies it as, well, there's going to always be a planetary uprising like we're dealing with right now, or there's going to be Xenos, which are aliens, or there's going to be the Orcs. There will be countless any threats, but he can't quite ever land a good point on Logan. And Logan just keeps on shooting it down like, well, we keep on fighting the Xenos every step that we are. These planetary uprisings are put down within days. There will be no need for us once the Imperium is truly unified. But then this is cut off as Horus comes onto the loading deck with his new Rembrandtser Vivar, and she is introduced to the Mournival as they are circled around Abaddon and Logan in this conversation. She's introduced, they discuss, and then they go down to the planet. And when they touch down, they don't recognize the place. The Luna Wolves, or now the Sons of Horus, conquered the moon, and Logan he doesn't recognize the landscape. It's a giant swamp, and they describe them sinking into the earth, where it used to be flat deserts and just not a swamp, anything but it. And all the ground kind of turned. There was a weird muck that smelt as poison through the filters in their helmets, and they are utterly confused. There's total confusion, but they still push on towards the target, which is the traitor, and that's where they leave off to part 2, which I'm going to be reading here in the next bit of this book. So I'm really excited to get to it. It looks like it's going to be a lot of fun, and there's obviously a battle coming up, and I know the lore ahead. I'm not going to share anything, but once I get to part 2, I will make a part 2 of my review of False Gods. Until then, guys, thanks for joining me. This is Darth Kilhoun signing off.